26th May 2017, this is Modi 3.0, the big verdict. I'm Supriya, Shrinate in New Delhi, and joining me in Mumbai is my colleague Sandeep, Gurumurthi.
As the Modi government completes 3 years in office today, it's time to pause, ponder and reflect. And as we do that, one thing is clear. Prime Minister Modi has decisively altered the Indian political landscape over the last 3 years. The BJP is now, without a doubt, the principal pole in Indian politics, and Narendra Damodar Das Modi, the most powerful Prime Minister India has seen in at least 3 decades.
Indeed, now over the last few days and weeks, enough newsprint and airtime has been devoted to all the good work that has been done by this government. And so, taking a cue from President Pranab Mukherjee just yesterday, we thought let us ask some questions and put the spotlight on the unfinished agenda.
Yes, on the verdict this evening are 5 independent experts who are known to speak their mind. I hope they're going to be at their provocative best today as well. Dr. Rajiv, Kumar, Sadanand, Dhume, Gurcharan Das, R. Jagannathan and Sagarika, Ghose. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us in the special debate this evening. We'll break this debate really into 4 sub-segments so that we're all clear on what we're doing over the next 45 minutes. Economy, security and foreign policy, politics and social issues. So we're going to divide this debate into 4 segments. So without any further ado, let's debate. Supriya.
Indeed, and let's kick off things with Dr. Rajiv Kumar. You are an economist par excellence, and so I'm going to ask you the question, and we will begin with the focus on economy. This government was elected to office on the development placard. It was elected to office on creating jobs placard. Has it not failed on that? The Modi government has not created jobs, and is that the big on the government's red report card?
It's clear that the growth in employment has not been what he had promised or what we had expected. But you know, the foundations for sustained growth in GDP and employment has been laid. You said that Modi has changed the political landscape. I think Modi has done enough in these 3 years to change the economic landscape in this country for years to come for the future. I think the structural reforms that have been taken and those which are in the making will produce the results, and jobs will come. The jobs will come in areas where they've probably not been foreseen. And I think what is needed there is really, one, the modernization of agriculture, because agro-processing industries will create the sort of jobs that we need, and 2, much further liberalization and efficiency in our service sector, service-dominated sectors like tourism, like education, like health, because that is where jobs are more likely to come than in classical manufacturing, which has been the burden of the song of the government so far. But yes, clearly, the jobs have not come, despite the fact that the government would like to tell us that the 60 million mudra loans that they have given have all created self-employment. But I think the youth of this country are not as interested in that self-employment scheme and are more aspiring for jobs in the organized sector, not necessarily government, but in the organized corporate sector, which is where they are wanting the jobs, and these have not yet come so far. But I am sure, I am convinced that the groundwork has been done for this to be generated in the next 5 years or next 2 to 3 years.
Sadanand, Dhume, we believe the government has changed and the Prime Minister has changed the political landscape. Dr. Rajiv Kumar believes that the Prime Minister has done enough to change the economic landscape as well. Do you agree? And on jobs, from 10 lakh new jobs just 4 years ago, we're looking at a figure of less than 2 lakh new jobs being added in 2016. Are you as optimistic on new jobs being created over the next 2 to 3 years?
So let me take that in 2 parts. I think it's undeniable that the Prime Minister and his party have changed the political landscape of India. The BJP is in pole position, as you said, and I suspect we'll get into that in some more detail in the political section. But on the economic section, I'd have to disagree with my good friend Rajiv Kumar. I think that they have certainly done some things right. They have managed to push through GST, which has been pending for a long time. They have a good record in terms of attracting FDI. They've certainly kind of you know, invigorated the sort of policy process, at least in terms of perceptions outside of India. That's also been successful. They have a few other sort of things, such as the bankruptcy code. So I would not say that they've done nothing. But all in all, I would say that on the reforms front, I would look at this much more as glass half empty than glass half full. And the fact is that jobs are not being created. And there are larger reasons for this, you know, to do with mechanization and other things. But I certainly think that some of the approach that this government has taken, for instance, towards taxation, has really not helped in terms of instilling confidence in the private sector. And finally, these are the people who are going to go out there and create the jobs. And so I think if I were to say there's one mistake or one blunder, I'd say it's really been on the jobs front.
Jaggi, coming on that, I'm guessing you're probably going to agree more with Dr. Rajiv Kumar than with Sadanand. But what's your own view on this government's track record as far as job creation is concerned? Would you concede that, you know, having promised jobs, the record as things stand is pretty poor?
I think we have to. I think, as I say, the glass is half full, half empty. The half full is, I think they have been very strong on the legislative agenda. You had many legislation on to improve FDI, the bankruptcy code, the GST, everything has been legislated. You have the coal mine has now been opened up for private actors and players. So all that stuff is done. What is missing in the reform agenda is, one, you've not had public sector reform. I think you at least had a glimpse of privatization in NDA 1. When NDA 2, I think that is a big zero. So that's the problem. The second thing is you had a problem with banks, and it was seen as early as 2014. But nothing has been done. Only now you have an ordinance asking the Reserve Bank to go and fix the problem. So I don't think it's going to happen in a hurry. So these two big failures, public sector, lack of reform, and this has actually slowed down nothing. The third thing is the Modi government's emphasis on eradicating black money and bringing black money hoarders to book has probably slowed down the revival, because when black money, let's say, is still money, it's high powered money. When it is floating around in the economy, it actually adds to growth. When it disappears or goes underground again, or it is somehow legislated out of existence, then it actually slows down growth. So I think over the long term it will be good for the economy, but short term it's bad. On the jobs front, I have two different things. If you actually see the employment coefficient, of Indian economy has consistently been falling. Okay, in fact, when you had lower growth during NDA 1, more jobs were created. During UPA years, when you're growing at 8 or 9%, job growth slowed. Now, when job growth is when the GDP is growing at 7, it's actually slowed down further. So there is something structurally changing in the Indian economy, which means it can, for every 1% growth in GDP, it does not create even 0.4% increase in employment. Now it's more like 0.2%. So that's the structural problem we have to grapple with. Until we create the structures to make sure that jobs, skills and the jobs available are getting matched, you're not going to see jobs growth. That's a fundamental problem which this government needs to grapple with.
Okay, I'm glad you're bringing up the structural issues. And Sagarika, let me bring this to you. Are you going to be charitable, and blame it on structural reforms that haven't happened and agree that job creation isn't happening on account of that and it's never easy to create jobs? Or do you believe Mr. Modi has failed India on that front? His big political plank was that he will create jobs, and he hasn't done that in 3 years of his governance.
Look, Supriya, I think when it comes to Mr. Modi's promises, none of them have really been fulfilled. If you look at the promise of 5 crore jobs, if you look at the promise of 15 lakhs in everybody's account, these are unfulfilled promises. And the way we are seeing layoffs happen in the IT sector, I think the big gap in Mr. Modi's record so far in the last 3 years has been job creation. I will say, on the other hand, though, that I think the big success of this government is political messaging, political signaling and very effective communication. So Mr. Modi is out there communicating all the time and communicating very effectively. So he's conveying the message of optimism, he's conveying the message of positive energy, he's conveying the message of change. These are all the optics and the communication we're getting from the government, because this government is superb at political messaging and political signaling. But when it comes to implementation and when it actually comes to fulfilling the promises made, such as in jobs, I think there is a big gap. I mean, if you look at it, for the first time, the IT sector is starting its own union because of the massive layoffs in the IT sector. Now, what is the roadmap of this government to boost employment? What is the roadmap of this government to deal with the fact that jobs in America for the IT professionals are shrinking? I think there, Mr. Modi's government has much to answer for.
All right, Gurcharan Das, if I may bring this to you, and let me just take a step away from jobs and talk about the ease of doing business, because they are correlated. When it's easy to do business, there will be investments that will kickstart, and then of course those jobs will be created. It was a very ambitious target to break into the top 50 club. We are nowhere close to that. It all started with a lot of fanfare. Has it been disappointing for you to chart where we are as far as ease of doing business is concerned? It made big headlines of what we began to do, but on the ground, have things really changed at all? A lot of people are telling us they haven't.
Well, I think it is a disappointment. There's no question about it. I would though take a more nuanced, balanced position than the one Sagarika gave just now, because I think a lot of good things also have happened. But I think everyone in this panel is agreed that the clear deficit, and Mr. Modi doesn't want to go to 2019 as having failed to deliver jobs. So if I were in his place, really, I would focus now single-mindedly on implementation. There are 6 state elections coming. He should not be really focused on that. His position, political position, is so strong that. And so what do I mean? I mean by that, for example, he could pick up the phone and talk to the chief ministers of the key BJP states where major jobs potential is there, and talk about the ease of doing business and what is the deficits, because now at least we know state-wise what is the deficit in each state. Secondly, you're talking about, you know, for example, the GST. Now, GST is a great victory for the country, but the problem is it's so complex that it's going to not realize its full potential. And this is, if we had stuck to Kelkar's vision that he presented in that report to Jaswant Singh, right, that vision was for a single tax rate, which is what's true for most of the world, and it was a tax rate around 15–16%. And now, and I think I agreed with it, I mean, Congress was right. We should have capped it at 18. Now, for example, cement is going to be at 28%. Now, the largest creator of jobs in our country is housing. And if the great program that Mr. Modi has of getting housing for all by 2022, if that is to be realized, you can't have cement paying a 28% GST tax.
Sure.
So this is the kind of thing, implementation and details. I don't think it's all smoke and mirrors, as Sagarika is suggesting. There's a real success. Our CPI, cost price index, has been the lowest in 5 years at 3%. Our fiscal deficit is under control.
We all agreed to at the start of the debate that it's not about what the government has done right, because like we've been saying, enough newsprint and enough airtime has been spent on that. It's about what it needs to focus on. But before I come to Sadanand, Dhume, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, would you agree that ease of doing business, what's gone wrong? Because now, you know, the BJP is in power in a lot of state governments as well. So, you know, earlier there was a situation where a lot of states were not governed by a sort of business-friendly political establishment. Now that you have BJP at the center and BJP in a lot of these states, yet why haven't we seen the sort of rapid improvement that one would have expected in the ease of doing business? Also because the government has taken a series of steps on improving administrative processes, why hasn't it translated into improvement in ease of doing business on the ground?
No, but I don't agree at all on that. You see, because it's the first time ever that a government has accepted, even accepted the World Bank ranking on the ease of doing business. The UPA 1 and 2, I was there, I looked at it, they just poo-pooed the whole exercise and said, oh, all of this doesn't matter. Not only that, but they've now got all the states on board. And they first had 98, they had 98 variables on which the administrative actions were taken. This was increased to 143, and now this is 312. You know, but what that shows to you is that there is a whole huge legacy of dysfunctional processes and procedures which we have inherited. We have been one country which has never removed the law from its statute books and kept on increasing more and more laws and procedures and processes. Now, this whole you know, mess, as it were, cannot be cleared in 1,000 days. It will take longer. And what has happened, however, is that as I think Jaggi mentioned, is that the black money, the black money has gone out of circulation. So that zing that you felt in the economy, that added 1, 2, 3% or whatever, that high-powered money, that's gone. And is that bad? No, it's not bad. The formalization of the informal economy, the formalization of the black economy, I think is a huge step forward. On the jobs, my good friend Manish Savarwal tells us all the time, and he's probably the largest employer in the country, that it is a case more of underemployment than unemployment. If it was that much of unemployment that you built up 8 lakh backlog every year, there would have been absolute mayhem on the streets, but which is not so. What's happened with the employment coefficient, and I hope Jaggi will agree, is that the employment statistics do not take into account contract labor, which is where all the increases come. And therefore, consistently, even with higher growth rates, you find lower job numbers. Right. On IT, I would like to inform Sagarika that in 2016-17, net there were 150,000 jobs added. You could look at the NASSCOM figures. You know, so the recent layoffs by some of the larger companies doesn't mean that IT is going down the drain. There is still growth there. There is still 8.5% growth there. You know, so the point is that we are getting impatient. And my point has been and will remain that the huge amount of structural steps, the number of steps that have been taken and which are work in progress, right, to create a sustained inclusive growth and rapid growth have been taken, and I think the results will show in the coming months, sooner, in my view, sooner rather than later, as the investment cycle also picks up in sync with the global economy, which is for the first time after many years is beginning to look up you know, in a synchronous manner, you know, with large regions beginning to get greater growth and growth in trade as well. So let's not poo-poo what's been done. But yes, of course, there has been a weakness in jobs. We have to accept that.
Sure. Sadanand, I want you to come in, but just, you know, to look at the big picture, because we're 20 minutes into the debate, we've got 3 more aspects to cover. So on the economy front, would it be fair to also assume that everybody, including all of us in the media, fundamentally misread Prime Minister Modi as an economic reformer, and that his sort of orientation is actually as much left of centre as it was of the previous establishment? He's sort of fixed administrative processes, taken a few bold decisions, but he's not the kind of economic reformer that a lot of people thought him to be.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that, you know, that's the heart of the issue. If you take a lot of the things, if you take a look at sort of what's going on with taxation, if you look at the slowness on ease of doing business, if you look at sort of various measures, you know, what it comes down to is a lack of philosophical clarity about the role that the market is going to play in the Indian economy. And there was a very interesting interview I saw with the BJP party president Amit Shah, where he doesn't even make any bones about this, where he says that, you know, our idea of reform is not what the pink papers think. But what do the pink papers think, and what were most of us who were optimistic about this government expecting? We were expecting this government to continue the reform processes started by Narasimha Rao and Vajpayee, and share their central insight, which is that you needed to roll back the frontiers of the state and have the market play a greater role in the economy. And over there, I think at the very highest levels of the BJP, including with the Prime Minister and his party president, there is ambivalence about this. And so they say that, well, you know, every process that we improve, you should go and call that reform. And I said that, well, some of these things are good, some of them are not so good, but they certainly aren't all, they don't all merit the tag of reform. And I think that really is the heart of this issue. And if you're disappointed so far, you're disappointed simply because that's the frame through which you're viewing this.
Okay, Jaggi, just come in on the point that Sadanand Dhume is making, and that's an important point. While we in the media and commentators like yourselves and Sadanand Dhume did think that he was going to be this free market reformist, he hasn't turned out to be, and that is where we misread. Like Amit Shah says, the policy or the economic rationale or the economic cornerstone of this government or of this party is not what the pink papers think, but isn't that belying what the BJP wanted us to believe before the elections? They were talking about jobs, they were talking about development, they were talking about ease of doing business. The whole Soot Boot Ki Sarkar seems to have got to them, and things did change from there on.
Yeah, I think the Soot Boot Ki Sarkar part might have, that taunt might have impacted the way Modi wanted to proceed with this government. But even before, I remember at one of his first coming out speeches when he gave it, when he was talking on another TV channel, when we asked him repeatedly about privatization, he says, no, I believe in improving the public sector. So in fact, he first gave an indication even before the election that his orientation, if he is Prime Minister, would not be what it would be when he was Gujarat Chief Minister. Even there, he did not do privatization or any such thing. He tried to improve things incrementally. So he was, and I think his political vision and economic vision actually go hand in hand. He is very clear that he can make a change only over a period of 10 years. So the first 5 years, he is very clearly focused on making his policies pro-left or pro-poor, or at least perceptionally that, so that he has another 5 years. And I would suspect that he is planning on doing something bigger when he gets a clear mandate for another round. So as of now, he doesn't want to go out like Vajpayee in a blaze of glory, but a loser in the end. He wants to be a winner. So he wants to make sure that he gets the chance to have the full 10 years to make the transformational changes that he thinks can be done. But he is not a true privatizer or that kind of liberalizer. And I think he wants to feel his way through that, and he will do it quietly, slowly. He's not anti-business, but he does not want to be seen as that.
He doesn't want to be seen as pro-business, even though he's not anti-business. But I'm going to take a leave away from economy and job creation and ease of doing business and talk about the other part of our debate, which is foreign policy and which is internal security. And we cannot start off this discussion without mentioning Pakistan. Sagarika, come in on that. We really started off our relationship with Sharif with him attending the swearing-in ceremony. Then, of course, that impromptu break from Kabul happened. The Prime Minister went ahead, became a part of those private celebrations of Nawaz Sharif. And now look at where we are, you know, at the ICJ on Kulbhushan Jadhav. We're not even on talking terms. Why has our foreign policy failed towards Pakistan? Did we misread Pakistan? Did we perhaps get it completely wrong in the last 3 years?
You know, on foreign policy, Supriya, I would say Mr. Modi has not been entirely unsuccessful. He has successfully sold the brand India to various countries abroad. He has sold brand India to the West Asian countries very successfully. He's reached out to NRI audiences. But, as you rightly point out, the neighborhood remains Mr. Modi's biggest challenge. He still seems to be confused as to how to deal with the terror that is terror. He seems to be still confused as to how to deal with the terror groups that are emanating from Pakistan. He does not seem to know what to do with an expansionist China. And yes, you're absolutely right. On Pakistan, the engagement has been, one day we see birthday diplomacy where Mr. Modi flies to wish Mr. Nawaz Sharif on his birthday. The next day we're seeing that it's completely Cold War and they're not talking to each other at a summit in Kathmandu. So the attitude to Pakistan, the policy towards Pakistan is actually a no policy. It's a non-policy. It's completely without vision at the moment. And I think the biggest challenge to Mr. Modi is going to be Pakistan. We saw only the other day that the Indian army had publicized its firing across the LOC, and there were rumors that Pakistan had scrambled its jets above Siachen, and which the Indian government had went out of its way to deny. So are we looking at even a crisis escalation compulsion on both sides. So while Mr. Modi has successfully sold brand India to a number of countries, I think the neighborhood remains his biggest problem. It remains his biggest challenge. His dealings with Pakistan are completely knee-jerk. I believe he's talking very much to a domestic audience while dealing with Pakistan. He's not actually getting down to the nitty-gritty of bilateral relations and actually talking Turkey on the issues that concern both our governments. But he's talking too much to a domestic constituency, talking too much to the Indian nationalist constituency. And there, I think, because of the political compulsions that he faces on the domestic front, Mr. Modi's Pakistan policy is confused and going nowhere.
Gurcharan Das, would you agree with Sagarika that the Pakistan policy is confused? On the one hand, one gets the feeling that this government wants to be sort of more nationalistic, not have any talks with Pakistan, no engagement, no cricket, no, cultural exchange whatsoever. And on the other hand, there is this sort of lobby that influences the Prime Minister and the government every now and then that forces him to sort of do a reach out. And so as a result, what we see is a confused policy when it comes to Pakistan. Gurcharan Das.
You know, I think the best policy against Pakistan or towards Pakistan should be to ignore Pakistan. Let's fix all our other relationships in our neighborhood. We started very well in Nepal. That's soured. Bangladesh has been a good story. Sri Lanka is not. So there are a lot of other things. And frankly, our real goal is China, is to engage with China and to keep the push with the United States. That's really, if we ignored Pakistan, Pakistan would actually start behaving better towards India. But let me just add one other favorable point for the Modi government, is that the economic diplomacy that he started with his trips abroad, that has been a very positive change in the mindset in the MEA. Most countries have a very strong economic orientation in diplomacy, and we didn't have it. And this started even before Mr. Modi came to power. But I would say this is a contribution. The mindset in MEA has improved, and they are much more concerned with economic issues to further India's economic interest. But as far as Pakistan, let's ignore Pakistan and heed China.
Sadanand, the very simplistic way of looking at foreign policy is that there are frankly 4 relationships that matter the most. US, China, Russia and Pakistan. I mean, India's relationship with these 4 countries is what probably matters the most. How do you see we've progressed in the last 3 years with all these relationships? Have we made any progress at all? Because China, things aren't good. Russia, one feels like we've taken a few steps back. With US, at best, it's status quo. And Pakistan, things have gotten worse. Would you agree with that assessment?
But that's why I say, you can't...
No, I'm not sure I agree with that. I think that, for example, the relationship with the US has, in fact, certainly improved. It wasn't looking so good in 2013, if you recall. I think on Pakistan, he started in this sort of, he did have a number of flip-flops, but I think post-surgical strikes, there has been a certain amount of consistency. He has a hawkish approach towards Pakistan, which of course is fueled by his base. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being hawkish towards Pakistan. And if you take the long view, I think he's actually played Pakistan policy quite well, because his initial overtures to Nawaz Sharif allow him to take the moral high ground internationally and point out that, look, hey, I tried to be nice, I tried to reach out, I tried to make peace, but these guys were incorrigible and I've been forced to take a harder line. And so I actually think that if you take the long view, Pakistan policy has not been so bad. In fact, I would say it's been quite positive. Same with the US. There are, of course, problems with China, but I think a lot of those problems with China have to do with China. So you have to sort of, look at some of these relationships, and simply because a relationship is deteriorating is not necessarily a failure of Indian foreign policy. There's virtually no country in Asia that isn't having some kind of problem with China, unless it has agreed to be a vassal of China, which of course India will not agree to be. Russia, your point is well taken. I think that sort of this is to do with, a historic relationship which is becoming less and less important. It's becoming much more narrow, much more about arms. Russia has less and less to offer India, and Russia, of course, also has sort of, felt acutely that India's moving more towards the United States has, it's certainly miffed Putin. Perhaps that could have been handled better, I'll grant you that. But in general, I would say that foreign policy has been one of the stronger areas for this government, not one of the weaknesses.
Okay, so the verdict in the foreign policies, it's been one of the stronger elements, not such a weak element, at least as far as the economic foreign policy is concerned. And also, I think on Pakistan, every prime minister comes with the mandate to fix it, but there's an army in Pak that is perhaps undermined. But let's turn this focus and talk about Kashmir, and that's a very, very important part of this discussion. Jaggi, let me begin with you on this one. A lot of people believe that the situation in the valley is perhaps at its worst in decades now. Are you going to blame the BJP for this? And there's a reason why I say that. This unholy alliance of sorts between two very, very unlikely partners, the PDP and the BJP, is costing the valley dearly. And that's a view that's coming in from most commentators, most stakeholders in the valley. Are you going to agree with that? Will you blame the BJP for what we are seeing happen in Kashmir?
See, I think the BJP actually tried very hard in the initial months. If you notice, actually, when the floods were there, the army went out and helped out very visibly. Then I think the Prime Minister even announced before the 2014 assembly elections that, look, if the army does anything wrong, they will be punished. And I think there was one particular case where they actually had sentenced an army. One was involved in some murder or rape or something like that. And he was, I think, I don't forget the name, but that was announced. So they actually started out on the right foot. But after the results, what we saw was an unimplementable verdict where the PDP won the valley and the BJP won in Jammu. And the only way you could put together a government was by these two fellows getting together. And that became difficult. And post the elections, what really happened was the separatist forces did not want the BJP to get an entry into the valley. So they had voted for PDP. So PDP found that it had very little scope for maneuver. And the BJP, which was strong in Jammu, did not want to lose that base and did not want to make the concessions required. So as a result, there has been no movement in the PDP-BJP government in terms of working out a deal that will last for a thing. So for the short term, at least, there has been a serious deterioration, and only till the law and order situation is this thing. There's also one social factor at this thing. You see, post the exodus of the Pandits, we have had an entire generation growing up in Kashmir which has not seen a single probably Hindu anywhere in the valley. So they have been radicalized because for them Kashmir valley is only a Muslim valley. And so for them it does not make sense to talk about anything else. An Islamic angle has come into their rhetoric. So it's becoming more difficult because of this. But till you fix the Pandit problem, move them back into the valley, and there is an evenness in the dialogue that happens within the valley, you're not going to see forward movement. You first have to move the Pandits back, whatever you do, and then you will see the situation change. As long as there is only one group sitting in the valley, you're going to get a very narrow consensus, and that will be anti-India. It's going to be like that.
I'm not so sure how utopian that solution really is. Will Kashmiri Pandits move back to the valley and can a dialogue then start? But Rajiv, Kumar, let me bring this to you. Will you blame on the fact that the whole solution that we're trying to find around Kashmir, at least in New Delhi with the BJP government, comes laced with a very, very nationalistic narrative? The entire narrative is extremely nationalistic. And is that going to be blamed for the worsening situation in the Kashmir Valley as well? We've taken a call, we will not speak to the separatists. Whereas your memorandum says, your election agenda says you will. Is it a letdown on that front?
Supriya, I can't imagine as to what other narrative there would be in India except a nationalistic one, and I don't see why that is not a proper framework for any part of the country, including Kashmir. The fundamental mistake that BJP made was to agree to this coalition in the government. If the alternative would have been a direct rule from Delhi, which I think might have been a damn sight better, because the biggest challenge in Kashmir for the last 50 years has been corrupt, inefficient, bad governance. which has failed to deliver to the people what they have wanted for, what they have desired, what they wanted. After the floods, for example, I just heard a story that if you wanted 3,500 rupees to repair your house, 500 had to be given to the Tehsildar in the worst of situations. And there is no accountability of the government forces as well as the armed forces in Kashmir, and that is what turned the entire Kashmir Valley into deep cynicism and alienation. The second point which Jaggi attributed to, and I take a much harder line, which is that today Kashmir has become the focal point of global jihad. The discourse has changed completely, and this has been happening over the last 40 years. And today the fight in Kashmir has to be, on the one hand, a very sympathetic, sensitive, honest delivery of public services to the youth, and to which we must reach out to, and a very hard, rock-like, tough stance toward the global jihadis, which are being perpetrated by the ISI, which continues to believe that they can ride this tiger despite their children being killed in Peshawar, etc., etc. And so therefore, we should not underestimate the challenge in Kashmir, but the way forward is that you get away from this completely untenable coalition. You find that you don't have credible negotiators now that the Hurriyat stands completely exposed, and therefore you rethink the whole situation and take the responsibility where it should be taken, which is from Delhi, and deliver the kind of governance that the people of Kashmir have been really crying out for the last 4 decades, and has never been given to them. And we cannot make the pundits our sacrificial lambs. We cannot take them just to be able to push them there, because that is what will happen until we have got a control over the situation in the valley, which is, as I said, is a two-pronged thing. Go out and meet the youth and get the global jihadis out of the frame as quickly and as tough a manner as you can.
Right. I can imagine a lot of people would agree with that view of Dr. Rajiv Kumar, but probably not Sagarika. Sagarika, I guess, we don't want to make it a sort of, not even make an attempt to try and solve the Kashmir problem through this debate, but a slightly bigger picture question, which is that this whole, talk of, surgical strikes, or what happened with Major Tarun Gogoi and the reaction thereof, all of it seems to be laced with a very nationalist narrative. Almost seems like as if army is being dragged into all of this. Everyone's being questioned. Is this good? Is this bad? What is your own view?
I agree. I think the army is being unnecessarily politicized. I don't know why that major was forced to come on TV and give his views in the way that he was. I think this is a case of a disturbing case of deeply politicizing the army, particularly on surgical strikes as well. We see that every time there is a surgical strike, there's a media blitz, and the army is forced to give out its views in the media. Now, this is unprecedented. We've never seen army officers actually come on television and give their views in the way that they are doing, and echo the sort of nationalism of the ruling party. Now, this, I feel, is a problem, and it is a very disturbing problem, because it means that the army is being, in a way, forced to toe the government's line and forced to speak in the government's language. And I think that is very, very disturbing, because it shows that the army is carrying the can for the failure of the politicians. Let's face it, this is a political problem in Kashmir. You have to reach out politically to those people. You can't expect the army to do your dirty work for you. You can't expect the army to go in there and take on the stone pelters. You have to reach out politically. And if you can't reach out politically, then you can't, on the other hand, politicize the army and expect the army to carry the can for your failures.
I kind of agree with Sagarika at this point in time. I think we're trying to find an armed solution to Kashmir right now, and the army has got to do a lot of heavy lifting at this point in time. This is a fascinating debate. I hate to take this break, but we're going to be back in a very, very short while right here on this very special edition, The Verdict, as the Modi government completes 3 years in office. Stay right here with us.
Yeah, with TT now, this is a special telecast on the Modi government's 3 years in power. We're taking stock, and we've put the spotlight on the economy and foreign policy. Now it's time to put the spotlight on the political issues. Over to you, Supriya.
Indeed, and I'm going to begin this with Sadanand Dhume. And Sadanand, a lot of people will believe that the Modi government is too ambitious, whether it's forming governments in Goa or Manipur, they perhaps bent the rule book or, toppling elected governments. But the fact is they've broken new bastions, whether it was Assam or whether it's Manipur. They're being ambitious even about Tamil Nadu. They haven't set a foot wrong as far as politics is concerned, the political electoral process is concerned. Will you agree with me?
Well, yes and no. I wouldn't agree with you. I think that's sort of overstating it a little bit. They have set a couple of feet wrong. They set a foot wrong in Delhi and Bihar famously in 2015. But since then, they have, of course, recovered quite smartly. And overall, if you look at where the BJP is today, 3 years after the big election victory, there is no question that they have gained an enormous amount of ground. And that in terms of political stature, Mr. Modi looms as a giant amidst pygmies. So yes, I mean, this is a very efficient machine, and the contrast with the opposition is telling. And what you see here is a hunger for power. What you see here is a ruthlessness. And I think the sort of incidents you referred to, I think both Manipur and Goa were sort of classic examples of this, right? Basically, there's an ability to pull victory even out of the jaws of defeat, whereas the opposition manages to pull defeat even out of the jaws of victory. And that's really a key difference between these two, between the BJP and the opposition that it's up against.
Sagarika, Manipur, Goa, Arunachal Pradesh as well. There are some who criticize the way the government went about, or the BJP went about government formation in many of these states. But there are those who believe, who would say that the BJP is blinded by electoral success at all costs. But some would say this has been going on for years. We've seen Congress do it year after year in state after state for 60 years. So what's wrong if the BJP does it?
Look, I think Mr. Narendra Modi today is India's Neta number 1. He is an enormously popular leader still, and the BJP is a very efficient, formidable election fighting machine right now. I was there in UP, I was there in Goa, I was there in Punjab, and I've seen how the BJP actually fights elections on the ground, how organized their cadres are, and how very effective they are as a political party at the moment. So they clearly are an excellent election winning machine. Mr. Modi is a consummate political leader, and he's the most popular political leader right now. There's no doubt about that. He's India's Neta number 1. But, where I think the problem lies, and I'm sure we'll talk about this as well, is in social cohesion and in social relationships and in reigning in the lunatic fringe.
Reigning in the lunatic fringe, we will touch upon that as well. But Jaggi, the only hope for the opposition really then is a mathematical hope, really, which is all the opposition parties sort of come together and form this anti-Modi bloc, a coalition of Mayawati and Mulayam and, and CPM and Mamta, sort of all of them come together and form a anti-Modi bloc. And even then, there's only a mathematical possibility. Do you see that happening at all? Will the rise of Modi and the rise of the BJP force all of them to come together, and then the index of opposition unity could be at play? Do you see that happening, Jaggi?
It's possible, but I doubt if arithmetic trumps chemistry in the end, because at the end of the day, elections are won not only because 2 plus 2 have to add up to 4, but because there has to be a central message. Currently, in the last 3 years, the only man giving a clear and consistent message of both development and unity and whatever it is, despite the fringe elements that may occasionally rock the boat, is Narendra Modi. He says, look, I am focused on the development of this country. I want to do my best. I am working hard. I am doing 18 hours a day. You guys follow me. Please help me by electing BJP governments elsewhere. People from other parties can come to strengthen us, but we are all moving in one direction, so don't stop this bandwagon. So the message is so clear politically that nobody really wants to rock the boat. What will the opposition say? That we want to stop this man. Is that their only reason for coming together? I don't think that arithmetic unity will ultimately work, except in certain states where the caste religious balances are very adverse against the BJP, which can happen. But in most other states, this kind of arithmetic coalitions will not work, and because there is no central message behind this beyond saying stop Modi. I think that cannot really work. So I think the opposition has to think about this message first before they think about the arithmetic.
Okay, I really want to turn the focus and talk to all of you on a subject that really deeply concerns me. And Rajiv Kumar, let me start with you. I think we can laud the Prime Minister on a lot of things, and I think a lot of print space, airtime has been dedicated to that. But I think the one big red on this government's report card is the rise of the right wing. You know, the anti-Romeo squad, the Gaur Rakshaks. I mean, this is moral policing of the worst kind. We've got to know today that there is almost a ban on cattle slaughter all over the country. The fact is that there is this right wing that's rising, and despite the Prime Minister being Neta #1 and people really willing to listen to him, it has gone unchecked. Would you blame this government for that?
Supriya, just before I come to that, may I say, just answer the first, go to the first question, which is that Mr. Modi has today made this a situation which is, you know, Indira Gandhi plus plus. You remember, you know, वो कहते हैं गंदरा हटाओ, मैं कहती हूँ गरीबी हटाओ. So he has made it, मैं कहता हूँ, I want to remove corruption and poverty, and they want to remove Modi. So unless that message, as long as that message remains, and by the way, we underestimate the people's support for an anti-corruption move in this country. And the second point there is that he has created the wave that he has created by taking some major risks. And demonetization was a risk. And today, from what I've seen, and you will see it again in a day or two,
you're right,
more than 65% people have said that they supported demonetization. Now, on the social front, you are absolutely right. I think there is no denying the fact that there is the right wing, there is the rise of the right wing. But I personally think that these are not, does not represent the broad trend anywhere. It is there, one, it is limited to the Gangetic Plain. It is nowhere south of the Vindhyas, thankfully. It is not even there in the other states, major states like West Bengal and even Maharashtra and Rajasthan. So it is just UP, Bihar and Madhya Pradesh at best. And there too, I would lay a bet that this is not going to be, in some sense, a rising trend of increasing lawlessness, hooliganism and vigilantism of the Gaur Rakshak types, because if they do that, the people of this country are smart enough, clever enough and ruthless enough to turn BJP out of the next elections whenever they are held. And so they cannot take that risk, because remember, in 1992, after the Babri Masjid was demolished, Kalyan Singh was roundly defeated in UP.
Was voted out. But Gurcharan Das, you agree with that? This hyper-nationalism is not something that can be sustained or will be sustained, because you see government action that almost complements these cow vigilantes. You see the violence in the name of these cow vigilantes, and then there are circulars that come in from the government that ban cattle slaughter all across the country. You know, hyper-nationalism is a reality that we are living with today, isn't it? And the buck stops with the government.
Yeah, I think nationalism doesn't really help us to get much farther in this area. Every political party has extremists, and good leaders are able to manage what Sagarika calls rightly the lunatic fringes of the party, and not allow them to dictate the agenda. You know, we saw this with Reagan. He controlled the lunatics of the right of the Republican Party. We saw it with Blair, the lunatics of the left he controlled. And again, Romney made that mistake because he was not able. He would have been a very good president, but he was not able to control, or he allowed the extremists to dictate the agenda. I think in India, Mr. Modi really, first of all, I don't think it's always a risk. It's always a threat in every country. But I do believe that now in the next 2 years that he has got left, he really has to focus on the jobs agenda. That is really he doesn't want to go down in 2019 with a failure on the most important promise that he made in the 2014 election. And so I would say to him that this is a distraction, this is noise. he must speak up much faster. And I'm sure he does not, I'm sure he's embarrassed by some of this. And it's very hard to see that he is actually giving the RSS a bad name, because the RSS is actually a very principled organization. They're not the kind of vigilantism that they would tolerate, that what we're seeing with these Gau Rakshaks and all. So that's really, I would say, you know, Modi is, I would just say one last thing, that Mr. Modi is a modernizer. He's not an ideological reformer. And we make the mistake. The reason we make the mistake is because he said minimum government, maximum governance. We all thought that he was talking about Margaret Thatcher's ideological language, and it's not. But nevertheless, I agree with this.
All right. Let me get closing comments. Sadanand, very quickly, do you agree with this, with Sagarika's view that sort of this, you know, the right wing has really been emboldened and they're sort of going unchecked, and the idea of India is probably under question? Or do you think that's a bit of an exaggeration and that things aren't as bad as they're probably being made out to be by a section of the media?
So first I want to sort of object to some of the kind of, you know, terminological sloppiness I see over here. First of all, I don't think, you know, as a proud lifelong right-winger, I object to the idea of these, you know, lunatic vigilantes being called right-wing. These are, you know, you can call, and I especially object to the idea that the people, you know, championing these kinds of acts are nationalists, so this is about the rise of nationalism. You know, call these people for what they are. They're the sort of lunatic right. They're the extreme Hindu nationalists. That's what they are. I do share concerns, however, and my biggest worry is that the fringes are being moved to the mainstream, and there's no question about it that things that would have been considered beyond the pale, we come back to the idea of Yogi Adityanath as Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh and the speed with which much of the media has whitewashed his previous records. I think that this is something of concern, and I, in fact, until a few months ago, would have really spoken quite positively of the Prime Minister on the whole. I think he has sort of, you know, he has reinvented himself. He has gone from, you know, he has become Mr. Development. He has moderated his own language. He has generally been quite careful in terms of the people he has picked. But in the last few months, I think he has lost the plot, and I do worry that the direction in which India is headed on some of these very delicate social issues is of great concern.
All right, let me just get closing ratings from my panelists, since I don't have time to get closing comments. So, Jaggi, I'm going to start with you on a scale of 1 to 10. Covering these 4 critical aspects, how would you rate this government?
I think I would put him somewhere between 6 and 7 out of 10. So that is good, but it could have done far better in certain areas, especially in the messaging for the fringe elements and all that. Mostly he's going, all the things are in the right direction, but more incrementally rather than in leaps and bounds. So 6 or 7 out of 10.
Okay, 6.5 out of 10 rather. Dr. Rajiv Kumar, do you want to take a crack at your rating? Are you going to be as measured or cautious as Jaggi, or are you going to be a little more generous with your rating for this government?
No, I'll be a little more liberal. I think they have done, we used to have 7.5 as the distinction mark, and I think what they have done in the last 3 years, you know, the kind of vigor and the kind of sort of, the amount of work that's been done in the last 3 years has just been incredible, you know, and the change that has been brought about has been incredible, and I think you'll see the results of that. So I'm happy saying 7.5.
Gurcharan Das, 7.5 and 6.5 is the word coming in from Rajiv Kumar and R. Jagannathan. What's your rating?
Well, I'm going to split the difference at 7. And for me, the biggest disappointment is jobs and implementation of programs. And that's really ultimately, it's not, successful countries, successful companies don't have necessarily great strategies. They have great implementation. So if I were Mr. Modi, I would just get on the day-to-day business of every day working on jobs.
All right, Sadanand, Dhume, 6.5, 7, 7.5. Where does your rating lie?
Well, you know, I think we live in an era of great inflation, both in the classroom and the newsroom. I'm going to take the politics out of this because obviously he's done very well politically. But if I just look at the economics, foreign policy, and social issue, it's very hard for me to give him anything more than 5 out of 10.
5 out of 10. That's a tough rating coming in from Sadanand Dhume.
Right.
And one will have to say that Sadanand was one of the big believers of this Prime Minister. I remember we had him in 2014, this very day, 3 years back when this government came to power, and he was sort of speaking a language of hope. So he is as neutral and expert as it can get. So 5 out of 10 is a rating that this government should take note of as well, just as it should take of all other experts. Thank you so much, all of you, for taking the time out and joining us in this special telecast right here on ET Now. Really appreciate your time and your thoughts. Thanks for joining us.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/ETNow.